It was late at night when Daniel Harper grabbed his keys and stepped out into the cool Portland air, the kind of night that felt too quiet, like the city was holding its breath, and from the first moment he turned the engine on there was a soft tension in him, a feeling that something was about to shift, because he wasn't driving for fun or freedom but to escape the silence waiting inside his apartment, the silence that still carried Emily's name in every corner, in the empty chair by the window, in the untouched coffee mug, in the way the clock sounded louder after midnight. And as Daniel pulled onto the road he let the car move faster than his thoughts, streetlights sliding past like fading memories, his hands steady but his heart restless, replaying the last conversation he and Emily had shared weeks ago, how it ended without shouting but somehow hurt more because of that, because it felt unfinished, like a song that stopped before the final note, and the radio clicked on by accident, filling the car with an old love song he didn't change because it felt honest, because it matched the ache in his chest, and he drove through familiar streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar, passing diners closing for the night, gas stations glowing like small islands of light, and houses dark and still, each one reminding him that other people were sleeping peacefully while he was wide awake, searching for something he couldn't name, his thoughts jumping between regret and hope, between what he had lost and what he still wanted, wondering if love ever really leaves or if it just hides until you're brave enough to face it, and the road kept stretching ahead empty and smooth, inviting him to keep going, to outrun the weight pressing down on him, his mind drifting to moments with Emily that arrived without warning, her laughter during long drives, her quiet way of listening, the warmth of knowing someone truly saw him, and that memory hit hard enough to make him loosen his grip on the wheel and take a deep breath, telling himself he was fine, that this was just one bad night, but the truth was heavier, because loneliness doesn't announce itself, it creeps in slowly, filling the spaces left behind. And Daniel felt it fully now as he crossed the bridge near the river, water reflecting city lights like broken stars, the beauty of it almost painful. And that was when he realized he hadn't noticed how fast he was going or how far he'd driven from home. And before he could slow down or turn back, red and blue lights flashed behind him, sharp and sudden, cutting through the night like a question he wasn't ready to answer, his heart jumping into his throat as he checked his mirrors, confusion mixing with worry, his foot easing off the gas as training and instinct took over, pulling the car to the side of the road, gravel crunching softly beneath the tires, and as he sat there with the engine running and the lights painting his car in shifting colors, Daniel felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the police and everything to do with being alone with his thoughts, wondering if this stop was just about a broken light or if the night was forcing him to pause for a reason, his mind racing through possibilities while memories and emotions tangled together, the past pressing close, the future uncertain, and as he waited, hands resting on the steering wheel, he stared ahead at the dark road and felt a strange sense that this moment, small and unexpected, was about to matter more than he could understand, because sometimes life doesn't change with loud moments but with quiet interruptions, and as footsteps approached his car from behind, steady and calm, Daniel took another breath, unaware that this late-night drive, meant only to escape, was already turning into the beginning of something he never planned. The police car stopped behind Daniel, lights still flashing but no siren, and the night felt tighter somehow as he waited, watching the side mirror while his thoughts rushed forward faster than his heartbeat, wondering what the officer would see when they looked at him, a tired man in a quiet car with too many emotions sitting beside him, and when the door of the patrol car opened, the sound felt loud in the silence, footsteps moving closer, calm and steady, not rushed, and when the officer reached his window and asked him to lower it, Daniel did so slowly, meeting the face of Officer Claire Mitchell, whose expression was firm but not cold, professional but human, her voice clear and even as she greeted him, and explained the reason for the stop, mentioning the broken taillight in a way that sounded more informative than accusing, and Daniel nodded, apologizing without thinking, his voice low, and as he handed over his license and registration, their fingers briefly brushed, a small moment that somehow grounded him, reminding him that this was real, that he was here, not lost in his head, and Claire glanced at the documents, then at him, noticing the lines under his eyes, the way he sat still like he had nowhere else to be, and she asked a simple question about where he was headed, one that usually had a quick answer, but Daniel paused, because he didn't know how to explain driving with no destination, driving to escape a feeling, So he said the truth in the simplest way, that he couldn't sleep and needed air, and for a second, her expression shifted, softening just enough to show understanding, though she didn't say anything right away, instead stepping back to her car to run his information, leaving Daniel alone again, the lights still flashing but now feeling less threatening, and as minutes passed, he found himself watching the road ahead instead of the mirror, listening to the low hum of his engine, realizing that the panic he felt earlier had faded into something quieter, something reflective, and he thought about how strange it was that this stop had slowed his thoughts instead of speeding them up, how being forced to stop had given his mind room to breathe, and when Claire returned, her posture relaxed, her tone calm as she confirmed there were no issues, no tickets, just a warning and advice to fix the light soon, and Daniel felt relief wash over him, but before he could thank her and end the moment, she looked at him again, really looked this time, and said something unexpected, asking if he was doing okay, not as an officer but as a person, and that question hit deeper than anything else that night, because it wasn't about rules or lights or driving, it was about him, and Daniel didn't give a long answer, didn't explain his past or his heartbreak, he just admitted that it had been a rough few weeks, and Claire nodded slowly, like she understood without needing details, sharing a brief, quiet thought about how nights can feel heavier when you're alone, and for a short moment, the space between them felt smaller, the world beyond the roadside fading away, replaced by a shared silence that wasn't awkward but gentle, and when she finally stepped back and wished him a safe drive home, Daniel watched her walk away with a strange warmth in his chest, realizing that nothing dramatic had happened, no big moment, no grand change, yet something inside him had shifted, because someone had noticed him, had paused long enough to see the weight he was carrying, and as he pulled back onto the road after the lights disappeared, Daniel felt calmer, steadier, like the night had interrupted his escape not to punish him but to remind him that even brief connections can matter, and that sometimes, being stopped is exactly what you need to move forward. After the patrol car pulled slightly forward and the harsh lights softened, Officer Claire Mitchell returned to Daniel's window one last time, holding his documents but also carrying a calm that felt different now, less official and more personal, and as she handed everything back, their eyes met again, not long, not dramatic, just long enough to feel real, and she told him he was free to go but added a quiet reminder to drive safe, the words sounding ordinary yet landing gently. And Daniel thanked her, meaning more than the words could show, because something about the way she spoke made him feel steady, and before she turned away, she paused, as if debating whether to say something else, then chose honesty, telling him that long nights had a way of pulling thoughts apart and that sometimes driving wasn't about movement but about breathing, and Daniel listened closely, surprised by how accurate that felt, nodding without forcing a smile, admitting that the quiet had been heavy lately, that his life felt paused while everything else kept moving, and Claire didn't rush him or offer advice, she simply stood there, letting the silence exist without pressure, and that silence felt safe, not empty, and for the first time that night Daniel didn't feel like he had to outrun his feelings, because someone was sharing the moment with him, even if only briefly, and Claire mentioned that she worked the night shift often and had seen many people driving for reasons they couldn't explain, people holding grief, regret, or hope, and Daniel realized she wasn't just enforcing rules, she was witnessing lives in between moments, and that thought stayed with him as they spoke softly, not about details, not about names or stories, just about how life doesn't always follow clean lines, how love can end quietly and leave louder echoes behind, and Daniel felt something loosen inside his chest, a knot he hadn't noticed tightening for weeks, and when Claire finally stepped back, giving him space again, the air felt lighter, like the night had softened its grip, and Daniel watched her walk toward her car, the reflection of streetlights catching her uniform, thinking how strange it was that a random stop could feel like a turning point, not because of romance or promise, but because of understanding, and as the patrol car pulled away, leaving the road dark and open again, Daniel sat there for a few seconds longer, engine running, hands resting loosely on the wheel, feeling calm instead of restless, and when he finally drove off, the city looked different, not brighter, not changed, but kinder somehow, and as he moved through empty streets and quiet intersections, he thought about Emily again, but this time without the sharp ache, remembering not just the ending but the good parts too, realizing that heartbreak didn't erase what once mattered, it simply made room for growth, and Daniel understood then that healing didn't always arrive through big moments or clear answers. Sometimes it arrived through brief kindness, through someone noticing you when you least expect it, and as he headed toward home, taking slower turns, letting the road guide him instead of pushing forward, he felt present, awake in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, knowing that the night hadn't ended his loneliness completely, but it had given him something just as important, a reminder that connection still existed, that he wasn't invisible, and that even in the quiet hours, life could still reach out and touch you gently before letting you go. Daniel drove away from the roadside slowly, not because he was tired but because he no longer felt the need to rush, the road opening ahead of him like a calm promise instead of an escape. And as the city passed by in quiet motion, he noticed small details he had ignored earlier, the glow of late-night cafes, the soft green of traffic lights changing with patience, the way the air felt lighter through the open window. And with each mile his thoughts settled into a steady rhythm, no longer spinning but moving forward, and he realized the weight he had carried out of his apartment had shifted, not gone, but placed down gently, and memories of Emily returned again, not as sharp reminders of loss but as warm reflections of what had once been real, the way she believed in slow mornings and honest talks, the way she used to say that endings were not failures but pauses meant to teach something, and for the first time Daniel understood what she meant, because this night, this unexpected stop, had paused him long enough to see himself clearly, not as someone broken but as someone still becoming, and he thought about Officer Claire Mitchell somewhere behind him on another street, continuing her shift, unaware that her calm presence had turned a lonely drive into a quiet turning point, and Daniel felt grateful for that brief connection, not as something romantic or imagined, but as proof that kindness could still reach him when he least expected it, and when he finally turned into his neighborhood, the familiar streets didn't feel empty anymore, they felt lived in, like places where tomorrow could happen, and he parked outside his building, sitting in the car a moment longer, listening to the engine cool, breathing evenly, feeling grounded, and instead of dreading the silence waiting inside, he felt ready to face it, knowing silence no longer meant being alone, because he carried something new with him now, a sense of calm and acceptance, and as he stepped out and looked up at the dark windows above, Daniel knew the night hadn't magically fixed his life, heartbreak still existed, questions still lingered, but something important had changed, he wasn't running anymore, he was choosing to move forward. And as he unlocked his door and stepped into the quiet apartment, the space felt different, not hollow but open, like a chapter waiting to be written, and Daniel turned off the lights, lay down, and for the first time in weeks, sleep came easily, not because everything was solved, but because he understood that healing doesn't come from forgetting the past, it comes from accepting it and believing there is more ahead, and outside, the city kept breathing, the roads stretching on under the night sky, carrying countless stories, including his, quietly moving toward a new morning.